Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're so excited to be here with all of y'all tonight. I know this is kind of going to be old home week. We have so many of Kung Lee's friends and comrades from all over the world watching with us tonight. Special shout out to the Amazon Salon, who I know are in the house cheering and loving up on Kung Lee. We're here to celebrate their novel, Begin the World Over. It's a revolutionary tale of Black and Indigenous insurrection. It's a history as it should have been, or also a counterfactual novel, which is a term you taught me. I didn't know that was a word that we could call our novels, which I love. So Kung Lee Sun is a lifelong Southerner currently based on the Gulf Coast. As a public interest attorney in Atlanta, she brought class action lawsuits on behalf of people in prisons and jails. He left lawyering to support undocumented and abolitionist organizers as a strategist and trainer, and to write. This is their first novel. So we're delighted to get to celebrate it with you. We're delighted to get to celebrate it with you and Mary Hooks. Mary Hooks is a Black lesbian feminist mother and field secretary on the field team for the Movement for Black Lives. Mary is the former co-director of Southerners on New Ground. Mary joined Song as a member in 2009 and began organizing with the organization in 2010. Growing up in a family that migrated from Mississippi to the Midwest, Mary's commitment to liberation is rooted in her experiences and the impacts of the war on drugs on her community. So it's an absolute delight to be here with both of you to celebrate this beautiful book. It's got gorgeous language, gorgeous descriptions of food, gorgeous politics. So I'm gonna get out of the way and let y'all get right into it. But I want to encourage everybody, you can ask questions at any time. Just put them in the chat or put them in the ask a question box, and folks will weave them in as the conversation goes on. But welcome y'all and congratulations, Kung Lee.
Thank you, ER.
Yes.
Mary.
Hey. My friend, I have been so floored by this book. What in the world? So one, we could just get right into it. Like, this is the first novel that you've written. And what inspired this particular story for you? Had it been sitting in there for a while? Where it come from?
Well, I'll tell you how this book started. So my partner, Sochel, and I, he's over there, got into an argument. We had very different ideas about the answer to this question. So the question is this country redeemable? Right. And Sochel was like, no, you've got a country that was built on slavery, genocide, land theft. This is not a country that can be redeemed. And I was like, yes, it can be. We as a movement, we've made mistakes. We make tactical mistakes, strategic mistakes. But there have been points in our history where if this had gone this way instead of that way, this country's beginnings would have been redeemed. So I started to try to write that. And so, it started with all right, what if Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both lived and things had gone this direction, right? Mm-hmm. Wrote that out because I couldn't make it work, right? Couldn't make the redemption happen. I was like, all right, surely the Civil War was a moment where there was a moment of possibility of redemption. And if Reconstruction had gone this way instead of that way, let me write that out, right? Couldn't make it work. Too much was already baked in at that point, right? I went back to the War of 1812. I was like, what if at this moment, before westward expansion had happened the way it happened? What if the Brits had gotten together with this had happened, that happened? I couldn't make it work. And it wasn't until I went all the way back to 1794, right? Mm-hmm. At this revolutionary moment, when the American Revolution had spread to the French Revolution, had spread to the Haitian Revolution. If at that moment the Haitian Revolution had come up as the white founders had feared into the United States and then had actually undone the United States, then victory was ours. Right?
Wow. All of that from a good debate. Oh, I love it. I'm so glad that y'all had that conversation. And you've been able to give us this delicious offering. And I think one of the things too that I'm also curious about, because of the level of detail in it, is profound to me, like profound. So can you say a little bit about like the journey of like how you got to a place where you were able to name, the details in such a way that, I mean, again, I had to go Google some stuff. I was like, I need a visual in my mind for some of this. How did you find this shit out?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's probably 3 years of research of that time period that went into this, like because it's like so much of that time period. There's one story that we know. There's a lot written about the founders, the white founders, right? There's a lot written about that. There's not a lot about like, what else, from any other point of view, from any other. So that was, I like doing that research, it's just like that part of me is like, I like to know what buttons were on the uniforms of the, I like to know like how the food was put together. But it's like, I couldn't write the story of the people that needed their stories told, without a lot of research. And the challenge there was, a lot of the main characters' lives are blank spaces, historically blank spaces, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of silence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's juicy. That's juicy. And it also makes me wonder too, like the through line around the food and the cooking. And, as a Southern organizer, of course, we all, understand that food plays such a key role in how we build culture, how we build relationship, all the things. But you really had it as a through line throughout this whole book. So speak more to that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the food all came when James Hemings showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like James Hemings in the end ended up, when James Hemings showed up, like the story found its like who the thread was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like in this time period, like at first I was going to write from the point of view of Denmark Vesey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And realized like, I could not find, because the record does not show like how Denmark Vesey talked, because history does not even record like what Denmark Vesey's first language was, like where he was born. Like that's like one of these, like one of the most important people in our history, right? Like,
yeah,
it like that was intentionally obfuscated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But James Hemings, like there's a lot of information about James Hemings because he was enslaved by Thomas Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like his proximity to Thomas Jefferson means, I can get a sense of how he spoke, but also then like he was the cook, like he was a cook. And so just like, I just followed his cooking. Like James Hemings is an amazing human being. And it's just like following him, being able to follow that, the food is James Hemings' food. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This was him being James.
Wow. And I think that, even in some of the points of the book, and, let me just name two. And I'm also, when I was thinking about doing this, I was like, okay, how do I make sure I navigate and not tell all the goodness by this piece? But I also in very significant moments of battle, of, where the cooking becomes such a glue. And I'm curious about how you see that as it relates to, this storyline of how, these different formations of people being able to come together. But the first time that came up, I was like, oh, they finna cook right now. It's finna go down. They finna cook right now. And so, yeah, I'm curious about how you understand and see the role of bread breaking in our movements now, and also, yeah, and it's particular time too, where a lot of that, folks are having to be super cautious around even being able to do that together. But how significant is that in our movement?
Yeah. I think food is central, right? It's just like food is just like being able to eat together, being able to break bread together. But then it's also just this fundamental question of just like, what does Soulfire say? You know, to free us, we have to feed us. You know, it's like, you can't, you know, it's like, it's central to the project. And, you know, it's all the way from the level of like, you know, we have meetings, we need to have good food, right? It's like good, you know, good organizing needs good food, all the way to like, you know, in this near future, as supply chains collapse, as like, you know, we need to be able to understand how to feed ourselves, and not just like feed ourselves the, you know, the bare minimum to get scraped by, like MREs to like, you know, get through, right? Like I'm not eating MREs in the future, right? It's just like, but how, right? It's like, if we tend to the land, right? That's what the food is about, right? It's like, if we tend to the land and tend to each other, like that's delicious.
Yeah, I thought that was a beautiful demonstration of like the way, you know, it just had like the spirit of care that comes inside of that, you know, from like cooking for the pirates, and, you know, just like when all the Maroons had come, and, you know, and like, we're going to cook a good meal before we go into this big battle. It just, the care that went into it was just so beautiful to read, you know?
Yeah. The food was fun to write too, because the research for the food meant a lot of cooking and a lot of eating. And so there was like,
so that was also part of the research process.
So there might've been a sort of oversized amount of attention spent on like research.
Well, it certainly paid off. It paid off. And, you know, this book is, you know, the no shocker there around how much of this, how political, you know, how much strategy is being named and identified and all the things. And there is a question, a discussion question that I want to refer to, that some of the comrades have put together. And this one question around where he's, and I'll just read what's here. When Ellison finds Remain, the prophetess, in the kitchen of the Picnic Plantation's kitchen and asks for help, Remain refuses, telling Ellison, "You are ready to fight. You are not ready to win." When I read that, I was like, oh, okay.
Let's talk about that.
Ooh, damn. I was like, that's loaded. So I am curious about what you mean, and how do you understand what is it mean to win?
So I wrote this whole book, Mary, so I can ask you, right? Because you're the one to answer that. Like, I know, like I understand from 1793 when they were ready to fight, they were not ready to win, what it meant to not be ready to win. I have had a really good time living in 1793, 1794 with these friends, right? Like, it's been a great life. You are living in 2022 with movement. And the question is really a question to you, which is, we are ready to fight. Are we ready to win? If we're not ready to win, what does it take to be ready to win?
Yeah. Oh, way to flip it back. You know, I think what comes to mind for me is, are we ready to govern ourselves? And are we willing to take responsibility for one another? And that's where I oftentimes, when I get a little like, oh, I don't know if we're ready to do that. Because I think, of course, we've been in this empire where much of our, you know, we haven't had the space to be self-determined people. And so I think, you know, even these calls to defund police and to invest in, you know, community-based, you know, support, or et cetera. I think, you know, at the heart of what is being demanded, you know, it's a demand to the state, but there's also an invitation to our people. To say, do we want to harbor each other? Do we want to be sanctuary? Do we want to actually engage in other ways of being in right relationship and figuring out how we, make decisions together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a big part of this question about, are we ready? No,
Mm-hmm.
no, we're not ready. We're not ready. And I think some of it also too is even our, a will to fight, and I think that there's a will to fight. I think, because we're in this empire, we sometimes get rocked into the comforts of what it means to be inside the U.S. and all the comforts of capitalism, et cetera. So even our fighting, there was one of the things that Remain the Prophetess talks about in the book is that surprise and momentum is two of the things that they had working in their favor. And I think often, even in our fight, our momentum is what we often lack.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's some shoring up that has to happen, in order to shore up our fight, that also, has to help us get it together so that we can be willing to govern ourselves.
Yeah. No, it was one of the things that showed up that I learned in writing this book, right? Was this question of just like, what does it mean to govern? Right. Mm-hmm. And it was just like such an obvious thing that came out that I was like embarrassed to have not like understood it. So Hoy, who was, who's leading among the Muskogee Creeks, it's like she represents the fully functional governance of a society, right? It's just like, and my mind before like digging through that had been so narrowed into understanding governance only in the ways I'd been taught, right? And there's something about writing this book that made me think, if we need to be ready to govern, we need to be looking at indigenous methods of governance. We need to be looking at, there are fully intact democratic methods of governance that are deep to this land, that are, that we can look to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm curious, this is also something that's come up when you said that. I think, when I think about governance in the context of just organization, inside of organization, and where I think that, inside of organization we struggle is like, one, how do we govern without hierarchies? But this is not that's oftentimes we don't, no hierarchies, whatever. But so Sahoy was very much, there was a hierarchy, and she was at the top of it, the final decision maker around all the things. I think inside of organization, where I think that it's a way for us to build our muscle around how we exercise collective decision making and all the things. But I feel like we struggle around some of the ways in which we think that hierarchies don't exist in order for there to be fair democratic processes.
Right. I think that is one of the places where we equate democracy with lack of hierarchy. But what I learned in researching this book was, there was a bit where they were talking about, there was a historic record about describing a meeting among the Muskogees. And they were just like, and so then it lasted 5 days and then went on 6 days. Right. They were trying to make a decision. It was a 6-day long meeting. Right. Yeah. There was a hierarchy. Right. So Hoy makes the final decision, but it was the process was just slow it down. We are going to convince each other, but also it's just like, and we start from these certain first principles. All of these things that like, we've not asked very much governance wise, like what are our first principles that we start from? Right. Right. Is the first principle a commitment to honoring ancestors, to protecting land? Are those the first principles that we start from? And that's how we get around to then what is democracy and what is governance?
Yeah.
Like. Right.
So good. So good. I feel like there's that piece right there can certainly be a learning opportunity for, all of our movements and organizations inside of the movements to really think about how we're holding that and not, and how we get sharper on like being clear about the values that undergird the processes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I appreciated as a member of Song is, we used to be very clear about, hey, it's not that we don't want to broaden the circle of who's inside of the decision, but not everybody gets to make certain decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And it undermines folk who are new coming in and like, yes, you decide what the strategy is. No, baby, you just got here. Okay. Right. You got to learn, the history of the org. You still trying, And so I think that there's just some really great value there that we all can be learning from. So
yeah,
that was so delicious.
Yeah. No, this was like, the process of writing this book really just put a new level of appreciation for me about what it means to like learn from our elders.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's just like to accept that like our elders go back, like, whether that means, who is included in that group of like who we're learning from. And, this all gets to the question of what does we mean, but like, it's like honoring your elders also means not walking in and being like, I have strategy. Like,
right.
Let's go. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too that I was deeply moved by in the last few years, I've been, and I keep saying it, and I feel like I just need to like ponder it and sit with it some more. But it's about raising the spiritual will and imperative of our people to fight. And there's something in it that I'm like, and I feel like this book is a really great articulation of like, I like something like this. This is what something like this. So I'm curious about how you understand the role of spirituality, in this storyline, in this retelling, this, what is it called? The
counterfactual. Yeah, no, that's a deep question. And I was like, okay, so Mary, you should start. Because like, no, I want to hear like what it, I would say when I started researching this book and writing this book, I was not a spiritual person. Mm-hmm. It was just like, I was a very practical person. And I understood spirituality in this way, which is just like, when I look at the sort of arc of history, I was just like, we are not going to win this without God on our side. Right. And it's like, so therefore we need to, have some spirituality because we need to, right. It was and in the course of writing this, I think like I, went through some feelings about just like, oh, that is so true. Because in the sense of like, that is what faith means to me now in a different way. Right. It was just like, there is the universe wants liberation to happen, right? The universe wants liberation. On some level, like we are already free. We are all already free. And all of what needs to be removed to make that a truth is some part of like how I've started to think about it. Right? But I am really curious about just like what it brings up for you.
Yeah. I think what sits with me is there's this lyric of a song, and the artist, he says something like, show me a God I can believe in, And I think when I think about raising a spiritual imperative of our people, of those who aren't, already organized and conscious, whatever, I think that part of our work and role is to build a movement that generates folks' will to believe in something, and not only to believe and act, right? Because, faith without works is dead, so also be willing to act. And I think that, when I look at just some of the things that, as organizers, we taught, how to, we write a script and we go knock doors and we do a narrative strategy and we have but I think there's also something that we also have to sprinkle in. It's the tone. It's the way that we invoke just it's like you got the raising the vibration of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in some ways. And I think about the character Mary in the way in which, you know, she went into, you know, the quarters and where enslaved Africans were held, and she's like, you know, came in just super clear about what time it was and what the agenda was, and also, yeah, just with not an arrogance, but a way that builds people's confidence in the thing that we saying we after, you know. And when I think about the conditions that, you know, we're currently inside of, whether it be, you know, the economic crisis, the intercommunal violence, and all the things, and you know, I understand that our role is to, you know, some of this is just block by block work, you know, and I'm also like, Mother Earth, you know what I mean? She finna give us the smoke, honey. So we need to escalate our tactics. And so I think just how even it makes you think about the ways in which, you know, previous revolutionary movements. When I think about like the Soweto uprising, for example, and even the manner in which folks took to the with the toy. Yeah, there's just a
doing it. It was like
right. And so that's what I think about. I'm like, there has to be a different charge, and some of it, and this is where I get a little like what's that fine line, or does it need to be one, whatever. But you know, I spent some time in the church, you know, so sometimes I'm like, Mary, that's just your old church shit, you know what I mean? And like what it meant when you saw spirit come and fall into a congregation of people, meant to see, you know, 10, 20, 30 people run to the altar when they say, all right, it's time, here's the invitation. And people like, yes,
right.
You know, literally make a decision in that moment that their whole life is going to shift their whole life.
Right.
And I think that like, that's the sort of invitation that I think movement, that's the type of invitation we need to be offering to our people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, you just said so much there, because it's just like how, and then, you know, you get to the how, or maybe, you know, maybe before you get to the how, it's just like, just to even understand what is the what, like that vibration, that feeling of that. I mean, when you feel the spirit, that's just what that is. Right. And it's like, I don't have, you know, all I know is all I've been convinced about, you know, I've been convinced in writing this book is there is no successful revolution until that spirit is felt. And it's like, how do you do that? Where is it coming from? It's more just like, how do you let that in? You know, how do you make it accessible? Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's where some of the logical, practical, academic, you know, sometimes it's too here. And, you know, and I like to, me and Kate Shapiro, we like to used to pride ourselves on being like, you know, just like, you know, like agitators, street fighters, don't give a shit. Yeah, we're going, you know, and not in a way to mess things up or nothing, but I think leaving space for spirit, spontaneity, you know, and just like not having it all figured out, but willing to move as spirit, you know, allows, that creates that level of vulnerability so that folks can be able to step into that, you know. And I think I'm reminded of Adrienne Marie Brown, and she talked about like, you know, how, you know, when you you know, step into that level of vulnerability, spirituality, whatever, you need other people to do that. And folks are either going to meet you where you at, you know what I mean, and step into that, or, you know, it's going to be you. But either way, somebody has to have the courage of conviction to be able to say, we got to do it, you know, even if that sometimes we might be looking a little ridiculous, or it may not be, you know, the vibe that everybody's on. So I think that's also a big part of, you know, what it's going to require of us.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate how, you know, Adrienne with her with her, has got everybody talking now about just like, what feeling do you follow? Like you can follow pleasure, like you can also, it's a good guide. And it's just also like in that line, it's like follow that feeling of spirit. Like if you can follow, like that's a good guide. That's a good guide.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think one of the things too that's coming up for me too around this question about revolution, and one, there's a question that, and I've raised it with different comrades at different points, but like, when do we know we're inside of a revolutionary organization and movement? Like, how do we know? What are the tendencies of such a thing? And I got an interesting response from Key Jackson, now based in Atlanta. And I remember Key Jackson saying that revolution it's the daily decisions. It's the daily small things that we do that is actually revolution. I thought that was insightful because, even historical moments like this, that was like, it actually manifested through, the burning of plantations and bloodshed. And I think in this day and age, I think that's a question, because I think we sometimes look at a revolution of that nature, like how we saw historically, and even myself, I'm like, is that what we're trying to get toward? What is actually revolutions mean in this time and context? Is it the same thing? I'm curious about what, I'm asking you now, don't flip this one back to me. I'm curious about what you think.
I'll show you the cover of the book, right? I had a whole bunch of the publisher and I had some words about the cover. I did not like the original cover, right? Had like the flames were just, it was so many flames, right? It was just all flames, right? And I was just like, I get that that's what people are attracted to. You burn the plantation, that feels like revolution, right? That looks like revolution. That is the satisfying thing. And I was like, you got to tone down the flames though, because when people it's like, that's not the story. Like, right. That's not the story. The revolution is the birds, right? It's like the revolution is this, right? It's like it's the murmuration of the birds. It's like, this is like, that's the revolution. And being in the society that we live in today, there are plantations that need to be burned down. Like there are systems that need to be dismantled. There are like, it's not going to be by fire. We'll be put in prison for arson. It's going to be by dismantling the bureaucracies, right? So there is stuff that when we say stuff needs to be dismantled, yes, that's part of the revolution. That's the rearguard action that allows the revolution to happen, which is the murmuration of the birds, which is the creation of the new world.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I feel about revolution. How do you feel about revolution? Now I can ask you, Ray. How far are we? Are we in a moment? Are we not in a moment? Are we? Yeah. Is it?
I think, and someone here wrote it where it's one second, kiddo. Yes, baby girl.
Can you ask Mama Tasha after you're done with your call? if I'm supposed to choose someone for career day? Well,
yeah, I'll totally ask.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, career day question right now. But I do think it's an ongoing process, right? And I think it is like the shift from, how we currently exist to what we're trying to become, right? But I think what I get a little stuck around is the how we get there. How do we do that? Porty got some hellos. How do we get there? Given all that we're up against, all the, we talk about, the dismantling of systems. We have our like issue-based campaigns, you know what I'm saying? That I'm like, cool, needed. And this thing is so big. It's so global. It's so, massive. So how do we do that? We take it brick by brick
Yeah.
And I'm also like, I get a little, I'm like, I don't know if Mother Earth got time for all of that. To be like,
Oh.
the climate activists say we got at least a good 10, 12 years before this shit is too hot to even, live. So what is the ultimate goal here,
Right.
And so I think,
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's pointed, I think that points us in a direction too, right?
Mhm.
Like Mother Earth being like turning up the heat, quite literally. It's something to pay attention to, right? It's like, maybe what she is saying is not, oh, you got limited time, to like, maybe what she's saying is you better pay attention to me. Right?
Mhm.
It's like, I better be at the center of your, like, of your spiritual practice, of your revolutionary practice, of your daily practice. Like, you better be paying attention here. Right. Yeah. Just always trying to like hear when something is really loud.
Mm-hmm.
Hear what's being said there.
Taking myself a little note here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk though about there is it goes down, and this, I mean, folks is throwing, folks is fighting, folks is getting it in the mud. And so one, I'm curious about why, not even why, but what was one of would like to actually like write it out to name these things, but then also the process of warrior making. I was really intrigued by it. And then what is the making of a warrior in this context? And I'm sure you're gonna flip this back on me. But I'm almost put it out here. The context of warrior making mean in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. 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 It's so interesting. A part of my work is also like teaching campaign strategy. And I've become convinced that like it's actually like in a room of 100 willing people, there aren't that many who have warrior spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you can always spot them. Right? You're like, that is somebody with warrior spirit. It's not necessarily the person who is just loudest, angriest, right? But it's just like, so I think first step is like, we have to be able to recognize who are the ones with warrior spirit. Right? And it's just like, and not everybody has it. And it doesn't look like the way we think it looks.
Yeah.
I like Mary and the story. And I like what I see with Mary with you is just like that warrior spirit is so, her warrior spirit and yours are just so directed, right? It is clean and it is clear, right? Mm-hmm. And it is like, it's avenging rather than vengeance, right? It is like what Bell Hooks calls killing rage, right? It is what, Ra Owens, the Buddhist, is like talking about anger. It is like, it's not righteous anger. It is like the right anger, right? It is the anger that keeps us alive. And then in a group, that's like, so I don't remember what you asked at first, but it's just like, when you say warrior, that is always like, we need to identify and understand and develop, and not everybody has it, and not everybody should be trying to get it.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. One of the distinctions that you're making with vengeance and avenge, the right anger versus righteous anger. I want you to say more about that, the distinctions you're making there.
Yeah. No, I think it's, there's a concept of the clean kill, where, a hawk, right, who can make a clean kill goes in and like makes it doesn't make a mess of things. Right? Mm-hmm. And this is like, and that's part of like what I feel is like we need to learn how to do. Right? Mm-hmm. We need to understand, like, and I'm not talking necessarily about just like literally killing, right? Like that's not where we're at right now. But the sort of surgical, clean, clear incision that cuts out the greed, hatred, and delusion that is at the basis of having screwed up this country, screwed up this land, right? It's like that needs to be eradicated. That is something that you can follow anger towards, that can tell you where to locate that.
Yeah, that's delicious. That's delicious. The precision of the kill, and I think what it also what I'm also hearing is the precision of our strategies, the precision of who we target and how we target them, and how we articulate and talk about our demands, our vision, etc. And yeah, there's something in that I'm probably thinking about for the rest of the night. What is this? I'm gonna be thinking about the rest of the night, because there's I feel like something that these last few years have, and I'm thinking about defund, because it's been a hot topic. Thinking about that, and how many, much of the critique was, it's a slogan, not precise enough, or what have you. And I think, there are some like Miriam Cabo who's like, oh, folks understood. It was very clear, and folks agree, and that's two different things,
right?
And this, I feel like this debate, or this debate that we're inside of it, and brought a movement around. Should we no longer say it? Does it may, ward people off, and all of these sort of things. And I actually think that, and I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and I said, I don't want, out of movement ego, to say, we're going to keep saying it. We meant what we said, whatever, is that movement ego, or we're just being honest about what actually is necessary. And so, there's been a lot of conversations lately where the sophistication, the precision of the language, the demand, etc., and folks continuing to grapple with, where we need to go from here, given the amount of backlash that has such a demand.
Yeah. We can go on. This is a weekend discussion. Like, I have all sorts of thoughts about defund as a phrase, and all.
Ooh, I would love to hear it.
Where you say it, how you say it, where you say it, how you say it, all those things. Yeah. And like, thumbs up to like Marian Kaba is right. It's like people understood it. They might not agree with it, right?
Yeah. But somebody's already ready to go to the weekend retreat. Right on. And so I think, and I just have to name, if you haven't read the book, folks are going to be super excited, because you just got like a queer brigade of rebels. Shocker, not really, but delicious still. Talk about that.
Yeah. It's like, so there were some rules of engagement about writing this book, which is that every named person is real, right? Every named person is a historical figure. And with the exception of Mary. Mary is a amalgamation. But everybody else who's named, you can Google them, and they are real people. Anytime there's a proper noun in there, like, and there was just something about, like, I was attracted to having James, who was, by all of the sort of evidence, was probably queer. There was just like, the queerness is not an issue of identity, right? The queerness it made the story move politically, right? It's like, because love is what, like, it's like James's love for Denmark and Denmark's love for James. It's like, it's what drives is what drives much of their action.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then there's other points, other places that, Romaine the prophetess, that's not made up. Like, it's just like, that's like, she was a gender nonconforming revolutionary leader in Haiti. Right? And it's like when you start looking into that and understanding it better, that is not just a sort of interesting fact of identity, right? That was like she, as a Voudon, like reception of the Virgin Mary, like changed gender, right? And it's just like that was a spiritual, like, right, go. That's a true story. That's not like, oh, just because I want to make it like an interesting story. That's all true, right? It's just like the gender stuff and the queer stuff is just like, and I think it's not so surprising, right? It's just like, if the world is going to be flipped in this way, of course it's going to be, these are the people that were going to do it.
Yeah, that part right there, I think I was like, am I understanding this correctly? Is when after she had that experience, that then she came out of that communion with the Virgin Mary, identifying, and I don't think it was explicitly. That's when the change of pronouns, the change of the prophetess, which is, I was like, this is wild,
right?
So, and I didn't know that was
true. Like she referred to herself. She referred to herself as the prophetess. She was referred to as the prophetess. All the way until then, she was captured. Where it goes off, she was captured in 1792 and then disappears from history. Like you then don't know what happened to her. And so those are the rules of engagement with this book, right? Which is like up until 1794, everything has to be factual or probable or possible within the relevant, within what evidence is available. And then at 1794, things can go in a different direction, right? When they meet each other. But they still have to act within what we know of their person. So, yeah.
That whoa. Now I'm finna be nerding out. I got to get some sleep tonight. But now I'm like, I have to go down a rabbit hole about this. And I'm just also, I think one of the things too that stuck out to me, just give around the house and stuff. But I think one of the things too, there was, and I thought I had to create a little dog ear thing where I was like, I have to ask this question. Oh man, I have to find it. But there was a part in here that Lord have mercy. I have to find it. But I'll move on, and I'm going to come back.
I would just be like, if you're going to, just to encourage people, like, if you come across something, you're like, is this real? Like, just Google and you'll be like, yes, it's real. And you'll be like, whoa. What it comes across is just like, how did we not know about X, Y? Yeah. How did we not know? And it's just like, and the real part also includes all of the motherfuckery that, like, like that note from Andrew Jackson, like offering to, pay an extra dollar amount for every, anything that's italicized, that was actually what he wrote, right? That is real. Yeah. So it's like in Pinckney, the governor is a real person, right? There's that, there's a scene when it's at his dinner, right? And it's like, I go through, the book goes through, the story goes through like every person who was at that dinner, at that buffet, all of the plantation owners, those are real people, right? It's just, I just wanted to name them because it's just like those are real people too, and they took part, so, hey, just, yeah.
You know, I remember when I was reading that part, and some of the last names were super unique. Not, you know what I mean? I was just like, but there's lineage here. And so I was part of like a little note to myself was like, I need to see like where, you know, because the family name, at least from, I just don't hear it. You know, I just don't hear it. And I'm wondering, is that even intentional?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know, I mean, I pulled those names from the list of the, 100 largest slave owners in South Carolina. And if you ask anybody who is in Charleston, if you give them that list of names, they will recognize all of the last names because those are the people that are still running South Carolina. They're running Charleston, you know, they're in charge. So it's, yeah.
But I think that, you know, I think that's solid to, you know, continue to expose that shit. You know what I mean? Because sometimes it's just the main, or quote unquote, the main actors, those who, you know, have stood out to be, you know, rather the worst of the worst or what have you. But, you know, this is everyday, quote unquote, people who was just engaged in business as usual, you know? I think that was super important.
Yeah.
Certainly made me curious.
Yeah. And that was.
There's this on this discussion questions. One that also is standing out to me is this is a reference from page 11, and it says the night before his departure for France, James's mother Elizabeth Hemings tells him to accept your reality, however dire, and then make the next best move, however small, to improve your position. And so, yeah, how does this advice apply to organizing campaigns?
Yeah. No, I think that's just like if you have one overarching, like what to do as if you're running a policy change campaign, like that's what you write at the top of your strategy chart, right? It's like accept reality, and accept reality means be clear about what is truth, right? Be clear about the amount of power you have, the amount of power they have. Be clear about like what is possible. Be clear. And then everything you are doing is your next best move. Improve your position, right? And it's like it's going to change because there's always going to be backlash, but it's just like it's always. Then what is the new reality? Now, what's your next best move to improve your position? I think that was. That was a little bit I was happy to put into the book of like current day, campaign strategy.
Yeah, that was a really good slice of wisdom that you said. Yeah.
Mouth of Elizabeth Hemings, who was an extraordinary person.
You know what it made me think about too, and I was having in a conversation with Alton and some of the boat comrades, and we were talking about what is the Sindolo had did this series over the summer around strategy. And it was about, in one of the conversations we were talking about what is the decisive advantage of the underdog, you know, and that's what it made me think of immediately. And I think since that conversation, I've been thinking, what is the decisive advantage that we have as a movement, given that we're out organized, given that, you know, we don't have the numbers that we need, given that we are not as aligned and coordinated. But what is our decisive advantage in this movement?
What is it?
No, what is it?
What is it? No way.
What is it?
Come on, Mary.
I think that I feel like there are a few things that we certainly are like, yeah, that's our jam. We could, you know, we really, and I think our ability to move culture, influence culture, even when people don't agree, you know, but I think people, still, you know, and sometimes, you know, you see it in small ways, like the folks who selling T-shirts on the street is like, you know, Black Lives Matter, you know what I mean? And one might say like, oh, they just, you know, kind of profited off of whatever. But one could also argue and say, actually, no, they're inspired by what they see happening in these political moment that we've been in. And so I think that there's something there. I think there's also something about, you know, what it means for, and very much so like you were saying, it's not just about the identity, and I want to make that clear, but what it means for, queer trans folks to occupy particular space inside of movement, depending on, the legacy of organizing folks come out of, that has, that has influenced the ways in which the movement has also has shown up, rather it be, moving from a place of love, longing, and desire, and centering that and joy as part of the medicine of the work. I think it's also too about what it means to organize folks who ain't got shit to lose. And so we're going for the folks who've been on the margins. I feel like that actually puts us at a decisive advantage, because we're nothing to lose.
No, I think that's wise, right? It was just like people who have nothing to lose, and then also queer folks who have had the experience of having created a counterculture, having created a world that is not just like, oh, I can get by, oh, I can be accepted in this world. It's just like everybody wants to be like, there's been a queer world that has been created that is so much more compelling than this world, right? That's our competitive advantage, right? That's what we've got, right? It's just like, and you get a look at, it's like, who doesn't want to be in the ballrooms? Like, who doesn't want to be like, who doesn't want to be like, it's like, that is a compelling world that has been built. And that's what queerness has like had the lived experience culturally of being able to say, we have created this beautiful world that, if you want to choose this or this, like people are like, I will choose this.
Yes.
It's just like, if there's maybe that's what we want to be able to understand right now. It's just like how to articulate this better world, right? How to articulate this, right? Where we want to be. And maybe that's also just part of like what it was about writing this book. Is just like, I can now have the space. It's like I'm gonna like give a spoiler here. It's a story of victory. We win. Like Black and Indigenous victory is the story. And it's just like, if there was victory in 1794, then what is the world that could have been built on this land?
Yeah.
Right? That's like, right. That's then, if we can imagine what that world is, we can also understand that all the elements of that victory are still present today, right? The courage, right? The yearning for liberation, love, the commitment to protecting honoring our elders, the commitment to protecting the earth, all of those elements that were in place in 1794 have persisted through these 200 some years. They are still available here. And it's like, now we can imagine, what is that world, right? What is that world? That's where,
That's when you say it like that, all of those things are very much still present. I was kind of in a little debate with a random guy that I met last week. And, I think and he had some very, he had his critiques about the movement and what have you. And I think that what I was gathering was that, holding what you said, that all those elements are still very present. But I think there's also, how do we leverage all of those elements in the current context in which we're in,
right.
All the things, because I'm like, that's the best of what we got as a people, that's the best of what we got. Lord have mercy, like the ways capitalism has seeped in, ways in which individualism and value of capitalism, like so much of it is like the what it takes to do the unearthing,
right,
to get to the goodness,
right,
and needing the warriors, needing the folks who have the the will and the heart and the longing, to be willing to uncover that and to I think that's a big part of our work.
And I know, like, I wasn't able to, like, it was only by writing this book that I can even imagine what it is to live outside of capitalism. Like, I can at least get an idea of, like, because that's then, what would happen after the end of this book, like if that was, I can now almost start to imagine. it's no easy thing. That's the power of capitalism, right?
Yeah.
It crushes your imagination about what is possible.
Yeah. And this book definitely awakens the political imagination around what is possible,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it makes me this counterfiction. No, wrong word. I keep saying
Counterfactual.
counterfactual. It makes me think about it. And I know you had named a few other pivotal moments, but you were like, you know, what if Dr. King and MLK, what if, and you took it back. But I'm even curious, even in the last few years, what are we, 2022? In the last, 9 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about where are those moments that we have if we would have went left versus right.
Right.
That comes to mind for you. And
because I'm going to ask you, because I would just say, like, I think the practice of, like, what the movement, I would say generally the movement will be greatly strengthened, right, if we develop the ability to have counterfactual thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to be like, oh, that went wrong, right? What is where did it go wrong? What is the thing that could have been different? What is the additive thing that we could have done that would have had a better outcome? Right? We almost never do that as a movement. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like, one, you're either too crushed or, like, because of all sorts of different factors, it's impossible to say, oh, that was bad. Like, this is a bad outcome. You have to be like, oh, we won. Like, no, we didn't win. Like, right. So I have to say, like, just generally as a practice, to be able to do that after every campaign failure, after every, and it's like after every, like, organizational, after every sort of thing, to be able to do some counterfactual thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. What's on top of your mind there when you're just like, oh, if we don't, if we could have done this?
I feel like there's a few moments that stand out in my being, in my brain here, where I'm like, I think some pivotal moments, that stand out. Of course, August 9th, 2014, when Mike Brown was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And what it meant to, folks, some by invitation, some not, you know what I mean, got up under Ferguson. And I'm curious about had things moved or shifted differently, if what would have happened had folks not gone.
Mm-hmm.
What could have happened if, that is super complicated, that particular.
Totally.
But I think it's one of those ones that we should do some counterfactual thinking around.
Yeah. Right. And it only works if, like, we get out of the culture of, like, oh, this is about blame, or this is about,
Mm-hmm.
a fault or whatever. It's just like, no, we're in this, and then let's do some of that. Yeah.
Sue, I'm with you. It's my new favorite word too. Counterfactual. I have to say it a few more times so I make sure I'm saying it right. Yeah, I mean, out here saying it wrong look ridiculous. But I must, because I think because this is it's more than just the basic eval. When we're
right,
we didn't, whatever. It is a different way of saying. What did you say that the additive? What was the extra little sauce? What was the other little turn that we could have done?
Right. What's the thing that we had agency to do that we didn't do? Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one too. But we had agency also to do as well. So it isn't just like, if we would have had
100,000 more people. It's like, yes, that's right.
Yeah. But I think like that's over these last few years, that's a really helpful way to be thinking about that. That'll help us, give us some, foresight around where we can go, what these next few years are going to look like.
Right.
In terms of movement.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and the reason I call it a counterfactual novel is everything is true, right? And it was just like it's asking the question, what could have been different, right? What if the people, what if the revolutionaries from Saint-Domingue, Haiti, had connected up with, linked up with Muskogees and had linked up with, runaways, and what if that had happened? And the answer is like, right, they would have won.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, what does that teach us about today? Right. Like we should be linking up, and if we want to win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, that also was super inspiring to see it feels a little lackluster to say the coalition that was built. There was more to it than that. It was more to it than that. And what it, particularly a part in the book where, before folks went into battle, how folks began to, even through song, the music around the fire, and there became a way in which the Muskogee folks were calling in, doing their ancestral practice, and the Maroons, but then how it became, less of two separate practices happening, but people actually, finding a collective rhythm.
Right. No, that was a really interesting scene to write, right? About like, because that was like, again, like using all the rules of engagement, I had to be like, what is the real thing that would have happened? What is the most likely thing that would have happened? And then you're just like, oh, of course, right? There's the circle dancing, and then there's the circle dancing. Like both groups of people have, and those circle dances mean something, and they resonate because, and it's like you can spiral a circle dance into a spiral dance, right? It's just like, and it's like there is a somatic resonance between those two, dances that represents a deeper spiritual resonance between the Muskogees and the runaways, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what that was, right? That's how that got written.
Yeah. That was super. That was delicious. That was delicious to read. And, I think, because it also going to this spiritual imperative, how it transcended just a particular, it ain't just among the folks who sound like you and think like you, but there's actually, that connective tissue that can happen across folks with different practices that can actually, manifest into a powerful, righteous, solid group of folks who were willing to, fight and die for one another. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
Yeah. No, that was beautiful. That was like,
yeah, you're like, I did that. You did this. You did this whole thing.
No, it's just like so much stuff just showed up in that book. Like that dance like showed up, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Like, thank you. Like, I just have to like write it, but it's like, it showed up. Ask the question, my job was just to ask questions in this situation. What is the most likely thing that was going to happen? And I was like, that's the most likely thing that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because all of those elements existed, and they still exist. That's the thing, right? And they still exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And they still exist.
Yeah.
I think I just want to do a quick time check because I do want to make sure that if there are questions from the audience, that we make sure we get a chance to. We have some questions. Okay, cool. Get a chance to let's hear them. Let's see them.
Oh, you see that? Okay.
Oh, there we go. Ooh. Oh, dude, these are probably. Well, how long have these been in there? I'm so sorry, friends. So sorry. Okay, let's take it back. Okay. So question from Sarah says, I know that you had James invent French bread, oven spring gumbo, and barbecue sauce. What did I miss?
I think there's jambalaya in there too. Yeah. That might be it. That was everything. That's all the food stuff. Good reading. Good close reading, Sarah. But I do want to say something. Like James Hemings is getting a lot of very well deserved applause right now, and it's like recognition about James Hemings, who's Sarah Hemings' brother, who's the enslaved chef of Thomas Jefferson, who's trained in France. A lot of that recognition has focused around mac and cheese. Like they're like, oh, James Hemings was like so talented, he invented mac and cheese. I just want to say, like, I have a personal like I was like, I love mac and cheese, but that was not the thing that I think James would have been most proud of, being like, I invented mac and cheese, right? And he was like, he cooked up some great stuff, and like, it was probably like Thomas Jefferson, like, who was just like, I want mac and cheese, and so then he becomes known for mac and cheese. But James was way above the mac and cheese game. That's all I have to say about them.
That's hilarious. I feel like that to this question here, and one of them is, are you writing a sequel? If nothing else, I think we need a recipe book. Just say it.
Maybe we can do a recipe book. Yeah, no, the sequel. I didn't intend to write this sequel, but the sequel that, like, you know, when this book came out and I reread it, I was like, oh, well, what happens? And so yes. I think I'm writing I'm writing a series of short stories about just like, so what happens, you know, like, does, like, you know, what happens if in 1794 South Carolina falls, right, and the United States is truncated? It's just like, does the Gullah Geechee Nation rise up? You know, does the Confederation, the Iroquois Confederation, like, strengthen? Does the Cuban Revolution, like, does the Cuban uprising, like, you know, do all the West Indies, like, islands become a confederation? Like, you know, like, so that will be, that's what I'm working on.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to it. So make sure you read this one first, friends. Get this with your buddies. You know what I mean? We got some stuff to look forward to. So we got to be ready.
Yeah.
And I think this question too around that Jen raised around wanting to hear more about the, you know, queerness and transness as it inside of the book.
Yeah.
We spoke about it briefly, but is there anything else that you want to add to that we didn't talk about?
I don't, you know, it's just like, I mean, I think it's all in the book. Yeah, I think we covered that.
Mm-hmm.
We covered that. Yeah, there was maybe there's a little thing I would point to have people keep an eye on about Red Eagle's gender identity there, about the, yeah, maybe I'll just say that. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This next question, our beloved Becky Rafter.
Oh, hey, Becky.
Very thorough question. Very thorough. What would systemic and institutional change look like if bureaucracies are redesigned, repurposed, instead of dismantled, given that so many of those jobs are held by people of color? The USPS is an example of bureaucracy that is being dismantled and that is causing a lot of issues with employees. When you can't count on a solid government job, that is frightening to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good, Becky. I mean, I think it's just like, I just say, like, when we're talking about like revolutionary work at this moment, there's the revolutionary work of building the new world. There's a revolutionary work of dismantling the existing harmful institutions. So it's like, it's not like, you know, we have so many assets that we are just like, let's dismantle everything. We have to pick and choose what we're dismantling. So it's like, let's start with the criminal justice system. I think the United States Postal Service is way down on the list of like what we're going to be doing. But it's like, let's put our energy into dismantling the harmful systems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right on. And you spoke to this before, but someone missed it.
Hey,
Kelly. Oh, hey, Kelly. How did the inspiration for this book come?
Kelly, I'll give you a shorter answer than what I said, but it was just like, I'd say, like, you know, I was a prison litigator for many years, and it was just like, that was like 10 years of writing horror stories. Like, you're writing like the true stories of what's happening in prisons and jails. And I was tired of writing horror stories, and I wanted to write a story of victory. So maybe that's a shorter way of saying, like, this is what, you know, this is what got me to move out of litigation and trying to write. It's like, I wanted to write victory. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
And next question from Tiffany. Who should we be linking up with so that we can win? Everybody. I'm like, everybody,
right?
All the press people, anybody who want this, who want to get in. I think there is certainly, you know, and I've been in conversations where it feels like there's, you know, one, there's this a lack of historical memory that either has been passed down or what have you. But as it relates to our alliances with indigenous communities, and you know, I feel like it's come up inside of this all the stuff going down around abortion, and folks like, yo, we need to like holler at our folks on the res and like, you know, see if we can make some stuff shake there and see, you know, how folks there are holding it, whatever. But I think like there is something as you know, as we need to be able to have access to autonomous spaces, and we know that don't necessarily that come with the other shit, but what it means to be able to have access to communities where there's some shared there's some solidarity, just a shared struggle, but also how we can be helping and supporting one another. And I think, you know, in just the context of abortion alone, I'm like, we need to see what's happening on the res and see if, you know, is that a place that can harbor our people, for example. And so, but I just think generally this question about the who, you know, I feel like our work is always to build a team of the willing, you know, and whoever's trying to get it and throw down. I do think that we certainly need to be working with and thinking about our international relationships and the formations and who is waging struggles globally, that we need to, you know, that's a big gap, you know what I mean? So I think there's certainly some, you know, what did you say earlier? What'd you call it? I think there's we need to be very particular.
Yeah.
About the who. That also, I think, is something that we need to be prioritizing.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I just, you know, the short form of it, the shorthand way of saying it is just like BLM and land back is like the recipe for success. It's not. It's like it's the thing I'm hopeful about. Right. And everything that entails is just like, that's where it's at. That's what I think.
Right on.
Yeah.
Another great question here from Sonia is, what is your hope for this book? What would you like to?
Sonia, you achieved every hope I had for this book, which I was hoping that Sonia would make a plum cake, and she did, in fact, this morning make a plum cake. So thank you very much. And I will just handle this last question. Karen Pittleman is asking, do you want to talk more about the importance of powder and shot? Karen is my writing coach. She was the editor of this book. She is the person who like dragged the story out of me, right? And she's asking that because she's being a smart ass. When I first wrote, the drafts that I first sent her of this was all about powder and shot and about the buttons on the uniforms and about the sails on the ships. And there was no story, there was no love, there was no like anything. So no, Karen, I'm satisfied. I don't need to talk more about powder and shot. Here's the reason the book is actually a story. So I think, maybe we should bring ER back on and like wrap this thing up. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
I love it, y'all.
Great teamwork.
There we go. My camera is slow to load, but I am coming back. There I am. This was so fun. Thank you so much. I want to encourage folks, if you don't have your copy or if you don't yet have the 5 copies that you now need to distribute to all of your comrades in the neighborhood for your book club, click this teal button to buy Begin the World Over from Charis. It really does help us when you buy your event books directly from us. And if you already have, the 10 copies that you need to distribute, you can click the Donate Now button and support our work through Charis Circle. $1, $5, $20, $500. It all helps us, whatever you want to do. Support our work. We do programming almost every night of the week. So much of it is virtual right now, but we also do a lot of in-person stuff. So we're delighted to be here with all of you in community. There's so many beloved folks in this virtual space with us tonight. That is a testament to your work, Kung Lee, and all the different ways that you have been a connector from the Lesbian Avengers to Queer Fate to so many different things over the years. So this is just such a beautiful culmination of your presence and ideas. So thank you. And thank you to Mary Hooks for being with us. And thanks to all of our community for being active in the chat and celebrating this beautiful book. It is definitely the balm that we need.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Y'all have a great night.
Good night.
All right. Good night, folks.